Now, the BRICS Summit is underway in Brazil's Rio de Janeiro. With concerns of global south and calls for a multipolar world, BRICS has managed to put a united front on several issues.
The grouping also strongly condemned the Pahalgam terror attack, rejecting double standards in countering terrorism. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi took the stage at BRICS, where he touched upon issues ranging from terrorism to reforms in the global multilateral institutions. He called terrorism a greatest threat facing humanity, while rooting for greater representation for the global south in multilateral institutions.
And during the BRICS session on peace and security, Prime Minister Narendra Modi referred to the April 22nd Pahalgam terror attack as a cowardly strike on India's soul and a crime against all humanity. PM Modi urged that condemnation of terrorism must be a principle, not a matter of convenience. He again warned against double standards, stating that victims and supporters of terror cannot be treated equally.
Prime Minister Modi also held a bilateral meeting with his Malaysian counterpart Anwar Ibrahim on the sidelines of the summit. He also met Cuba's President Miguel Diaz-Canel, with both Cuba and Malaysia taking part in the summit as partner countries.
Now, Prime Minister Modi also addressed the plenary session of the summit, calling out double standards towards global south. He urged for a multipolar world order with stronger representation from global south. Russian President Vladimir Putin addressed the plenary session via video link. Putin also echoed the same sentiment on global multilateral institutions.
He said the liberal globalization model is becoming obsolete. Listen to this.
We all see that fundamental changes are taking place in the world. The unipolar system of international relations that serve the interests of the so-called golden billion is becoming a thing of the past. It is being replaced by a more just, multipolar world. The process of changing the world's economic order continues to gain momentum. Everything indicates that the model of liberal globalization has become obsolete.
And BRICS issued a strong declaration after the leaders meet. It condemned the deadly Pahalgam terror attack and the Israel-US military strikes against Iran. They also called for an unconditional ceasefire in Gaza and expressed serious concerns over President Trump's new tariff policies.
The leaders of the BRICS nations welcome Indonesia as a member of the group, while 10 nations, including Belarus, Bolivia, Kazakhstan, Nigeria, Malaysia, Thailand, Cuba, Vietnam, Uganda, and Uzbekistan as partner countries. The BRICS nations collectively represent nearly half the world's population, over a third of a global land area, and roughly a quarter of global economic output. And well, for more in this story, we are now being joined by our Assistant Editor of Foreign Affairs, Dan Cebu, on the phone line. Thank you so much, Dan, for speaking to us right now. This is a big statement coming from the BRICS Summit. This comes after, Prime Minister Modi has also called out the double standards. What more can you tell us?
Well, an important development for India. This is, in fact, a development comes at a time when we know that India's focus is to highlight Pakistan's support to terrorism across the world. Earlier, we saw the Quad also condemning the Pahalgam terror attack, and before that, we saw the UNSC statement as well. Of course, the focus remains as to how the world should, of course, focus on Pakistan taking a concerted action against terror groups on its territory or territories under control. A short while ago, we saw the MEA also holding a press conference in Rio, where the Indian officials talked about essentially how this is a strong message of solidarity and condemnation, and one that, of course, India's neighbors should closely follow or observe. That's the big message from India. But all in all, do we expect India highlighting the issue of terrorism from Pakistan and other global forums as well? While UNSC, Quad and BRICS have condemned the Pahalgam terror attack, one grouping that hasn't done so is the SCU, and that's primarily because Pakistan is a member of the grouping and in all likelihood has been opposing that. But all in all, India will be keen on focusing on issues like cross-border terrorism, even the bilateral exchanges. Remember, today the Indian Prime Minister will be on a state visit to Brazil, and focus in that joint statement is also expected on a Pahalgam terror attack. We earlier saw the Indian Prime Minister traveling to Trinidad and Tobago and also to Ghana, where there was a strong condemnation by the leaders, including, of course, in Argentina as well. In fact, the Indian Prime Minister is on a 5-day-long, 5-country visit, and in this visit, the Indian Prime Minister also travels to Namibia as well. So, in most of the countries, in fact, all of the countries, we have seen the leaders condemning the Pahalgam terror attack.
Thanks, Siddhant, for getting us the latest on that. Of course, lots more to be expected. Other than the SCO, because of Pakistan's presence, all other groupings have unitedly condemned the deadly Pahalgam attack. And Prime Minister Modi is using his tour of 5 nations and the BRICS Summit to reaffirm India's leadership ambitions for the Global South.
The Prime Minister is also blending calls to elevate the Global South with the showcase of India's economic ascent. Global South is a term used for developing nations.
Now, at the 17th BRICS Summit, Modi said that the Global South has received only empty promises about climate funding, sustainable development and access to technology. He said the Global South was a victim of double standards. Modi said the interests of the Global South have not been given due priority, whether it is about development, distribution of resources or matters related to security.
He also added that global institutions created in the 20th century have failed to provide adequate representation to 2/3 of humanity. PM Modi added that countries that make significant contributions to today's global economy have not been given a seat at the decision-making table.
Last week on Thursday, Modi, in an address to the Ghana Parliament, said, and I quote here, "Progress cannot come without giving voice to the Global South." On Friday, Modi highlighted India's economic rise in a speech to the Indian diaspora in Trinidad and Tobago. He said, "Soon we will be among the top 3 economies in the world. The fruits of India's growth and progress are reaching the most needy."
Meanwhile, Chinese President Xi Jinping and Russian President Vladimir Putin skipped the summit on the seaside Brazilian city, although President Putin did join in via video. Now, however, Russian President did urge the BRICS Summit and also on mutual cooperation.
Putin reiterated Modi's message and said the liberal globalization model is becoming obsolete. In a stump to the dollar, the Russian president urged BRICS members to use national currencies for trade settlements.
Создание на площадке БРИКС независимой расчетно-депозитарной системы.